The purpose of this screencast is to share with you the way we report out student progress using the parent portal of Powerschool. One thing you'll notice is that we don't have a percentage score displayed next to our classes. That's because we report out student progress using levels of proficiency for each academic standard that is assessed. A standard expresses what a student should know and be able to do in a subject area and grade level. And the majority of ASD standards come from American Education Reaches Out, or AERO, a U.S. State Department initiative that is aligned to the curriculum in the U.S., commonly known as Common Core. The standards have been developed by subject area educators and ensure that students are prepared academically. They're aligned with elementary and the high school and support academic preparation for university. So how do we get to look at these standards? Well, next to each class listed in Powerschool is a blue line that is actually a hyperlink to another page where we can find this information. So after I click the link for science, for example, it's going to take me to the science class page. First, let's look at our learning habits. These are very important and do influence a student's academic progress to a large extent. As mentioned during our back to school night, we've consolidated our learning habits into 3 areas: being ready to learn, here it is down here. That means completing work on time and having all materials ready for class. Working hard to learn, which is putting forth our best effort and making use of teachers' feedback to grow. And then finally we have working with others to learn, collaborating with our peers. There are also 3 levels of performance that can be assessed: working independently, which is our goal for all students, with reminders, meaning a student doesn't always self-correct on their own and needs guidance from time to time, and dependent, which means that a student requires some form of direct intervention at this time in order to demonstrate the habit. In this case, our sample student is finding it challenging to work with others to learn, needs some reminders to work hard to learn, but is independent when it comes to being ready to learn. Now let's look at our academic standards. Students are assessed using one of 4 score descriptors. We have advanced, which demonstrates an in-depth understanding of the standard; proficient, which is our goal here, consistently demonstrating an understanding of the standard. Advanced is really just icing on the cake, but this is what we want all students to have. Approaching, which means that they're demonstrating some understanding or a partial understanding of the standard. And limited. The student has not yet demonstrated sufficient understanding of the standard. We also have a score that represents insufficient or incomplete evidence that may be used if the teacher doesn't have sufficient assessment evidence from that student to make a judgment about their academic progress. And this could happen if a student missed too many days of school, for example. We just wouldn't have the evidence to make a determination one way or another as to whether or not they've met standard proficiency. Most subjects have multiple standards that are assessed throughout the year, which provides lots of information, but this can be a little cumbersome to sort through. As a result, we've grouped all like standards together into something we call strands. Now here's a couple of them here. For example, the forces in motion strand represents all the forces in motion science standards assessed so far this year. Here we can see the overall level of performance for each of our strands. We have an approaching for forces in motion, and proficient for inquiry skills. Think of the strand score as your first look at your child's overall progress. Because strand scores are made up of like standards, we need to look further down to see what made up these scores. Every assignment that your son or daughter completes gets listed here under assignment details. You can see the date of the assignment title, and the standards that were assessed during this assignment. And there can be more than one standard assessed during an assignment as well. Next to the individual standards, you also see a proficiency score. Remember, our like standards get combined together. So standards that are all part of the forces in motion standard will be combined into that strand score. Notice that some of the standards have a special code symbol next to them, a purple triangle. This indicates that the score is exempt or not included in your child's overall level of progress. That's because this assignment or assessment was used as a tool for learning. The intention was to give some practice with the standard, allowing students to see where they are in their learning so that they know where to work on. It provides them with essential feedback to grow. In this case, the first two assignments were used as assessments for feedback. So the forces in motion activity and the race activity motion. The next assignments, those without the purple triangle down here, these are assessments of learning, and they do count towards your child's strand scores. You can see that initially this student was approaching in some of the forces in motion standards. And later, when the teacher measured their learning again, they have some proficiency and even advanced in some of the standards. You may also notice that in one standard, forces on an object, they began with an approaching and never improved. In fact, here it is again, and now it's down to limited. This resulted in an overall strand score of approaching up here, which means that a partial understanding is what we have. In this case, there are two standards at proficiency and one of limited in forces in motion, giving them an overall strand score of approaching. It's important to keep an eye out for standards that are listed as limited, because these are the ones that we want the students to address. In this case, it's not a simple matter of working harder, but working smarter, focusing in on the forces on an object standard as opposed to looking at all of the standards. Please know that as teachers add additional assignments to their grade books, the strand scores will change, and this is especially true near the beginning of the year. Strand scores are really meant to provide an overall level of proficiency. So here we have them up here again, the overall level of proficiency. They serve to guide us into looking further into the standards themselves so we know what to focus in on. It can be a little overwhelming going over all of these standards and all of this information. So I would encourage you to talk to your son or daughter about their level of performance. Ask them where they are doing well or where they may need to place additional focus moving forward. After all, this is all about them. Thank you very much.